A kind millionaire CEO hires a young janitor to pretend to be his bride. He's shocked when Chicago shimmered in the early morning light as the Willis Tower sliced through the low clouds. Inside the glass-wrapped headquarters of Hanover Global, a silent tension hung in the air. The top floor, known for its hush of polished marble and whispered power moves, was unusually restless. And at its center sat Jackson Hanover, young, striking, and Chicago's most enigmatic billionaire CEO. Before we move further, please ensure to like, share, and subscribe for heartwarming stories like this. Likewise, tell us where you are watching from in the comment below. But today, even his signature calm was fractured. His ex-fiancee's wedding was set for next month. And not just any wedding. Chicago's press would swarm it like bees to sugar. Madison Caldwell, daughter of an old-money political dynasty, was marrying the CEO of Hanover's biggest rival. The RSVP sat unopened on Jackson's sleek black desk. He didn't plan to attend until a cruel little line in the gossip columns made its way to him. Word is Hanover's still single because he's impossible to love. That was all it took. Across the city, 22-year-old Sophie Lane mopped the lobby floor of Hanover Global. Her uniform clung damp against her skin, her hair tied in a messy bun. No one looked her way. They never did. She was invisible, like the faint scent of bleach she trailed behind. She hadn't always been invisible. Before her mother died, Sophie had been an architecture student, a dreamer. But dreams cost money, and grief took time. Cleaning office buildings helped cover her brother's school fees. Hope, that was a luxury for someone else. So when a sharply dressed woman in heels approached her mop bucket and said, "Mr. Hanover wants to see you." Now, Sophie froze. "You sure you have the right person?" "Janitor. Lower level. Mop in hand." That's what he said. Sophie wiped her palms on her jumpsuit and followed. Up on the 76th floor, the air changed. It was colder, quieter, like being inside a bank vault of power. She stepped into his office, confused, nervous. Jackson stood near the window, the skyline at his back, hands in his pockets. "You're Sophie Lane?" "Yes, sir." "Did I mess something up?" "No. You clean these floors well. That's why I noticed you." She blinked. That made no sense. He turned to face her fully. "I need someone to pose as my fiancé for one night. It's complicated. You'll be compensated more than fairly." She stared. "Excuse me? I need someone smart, poised, invisible enough not to be connected to scandal, but sharp enough to hold her own at a black-tie gala." "I've read your file." "You what file?" "I checked background details on all my employees. You studied architecture. You've never been late. You've taken 2 sick days in 2 years. This is insane." "Possibly, but the offer stands. $75,000 for one evening. You'll be trained, dressed, protected. And when it's over, you disappear richer than you were before." Her heart raced. Sophie laughed, half nervous, half furious. "Why me?" Jackson's voice softened. "Because I trust people who've had to clean up after others. They know the truth." That silenced her. She looked around at the glinting shelves, the wall-sized art, the silent confidence of a man who had everything, and still wanted something fake. "I'll think about it," she whispered. He nodded. "You have 24 hours. As she walked back into the elevator, her hands trembling, Sophie didn't notice the assistant watching her from a corner. Eyes sharp, calculating. Not everyone likes surprises in the Hanover Empire. And far below, the city moved on, unaware that a janitor just stepped into a role that would shake the social elite to its core. Sophie didn't sleep that night. $75,000. That kind of money would cover her brother's next 2 years of school, maybe even put her back in classes herself. But what cost? She wasn't a liar. She wasn't an actress. And she definitely wasn't the type who belonged in cocktail gowns, clinking glasses with billionaires. Still, as dawn broke over the lake and the city slowly stirred to life, something inside her shifted. She thought about the way Jackson had looked at her. Not like she was a mop-wielding ghost, but like she was somebody. That looked stuck. By 9 a.m., she walked into Hanover Global with a new fire in her chest. "I'll do it," she said to the assistant, a tall woman with icy eyes named Veronica. Veronica didn't smile. "Of course you will. Follow me." What followed was a whirlwind Sophie couldn't have imagined. She was whisked into a suite hidden behind the executive wing, a space she never knew existed, where stylists, etiquette coaches, and a stern woman named Carla, who introduced herself as your polished consultant, were waiting. Polish? Sophie echoed. Yes, Carla replied coolly, circling her like a hawk. Not the country, the refinement. They started with posture, then voice modulation. How to make conversation with senators and CEOs. How to wear heels like you'd been born in them. Which fork went with which course. How to accept compliments you didn't believe and deliver ones that hit like champagne. It was exhausting, but Sophie, to her own surprise, absorbed it. Maybe it was the years of pushing through grief. Maybe it was the hunger to finally be seen. Maybe it was just the thrill of reclaiming something the world had convinced her she'd lost. Meanwhile, Jackson kept his distance. He reviewed reports, made quiet calls, and offered occasional nods of approval as Sophie was transformed. On the third day, he finally addressed her directly. You're doing well. She raised an eyebrow. Thanks. I've graduated from janitor to porcelain doll. A flicker of a smile touched his lips. You know, she continued, you never told me why you're doing this. Is it really just about your ex? His smile vanished. She chose a man who only wanted headlines. Now they'll get them. But not the kind they expected. So I'm revenge, she said flatly. No, your insurance that I leave with dignity. That answer sat heavily between them. Later that afternoon, a driver took Sophie to a boutique on Oak Street. The kind of place where dresses weren't sold. They were whispered about. Inside, the head stylist greeted her with a look of initial confusion, then awe as Sophie, now walking with quiet confidence, stepped forward. Jackson arrived at the final fitting. The moment he saw her, his expression faltered. The black gown hugged her figure with understated elegance. Her hair swept back in a low knot, exposing her neckline. Subtle diamond earrings glittered at her ears. Her eyes, lined and softly shadowed, looked directly into his. Not with defiance, but with certainty. Say something, she murmured. He cleared his throat. You look like you were born for this. She gave a half smile. Funny. I was born to a single mom who cleaned hospitals. Jackson didn't laugh. I mean it, he said. She looked away, unsure of how to carry the weight of sincerity. As she stepped back onto the pedestal, the stylist adjusted her hem. You'll steal every spotlight in that room, the woman said quietly. Sophie whispered, more to herself than anyone, let them look. But across the boutique, Veronica stood in a shadowed corner, phone in hand. And her expression said only one thing. This was never supposed to work this well. Ava woke up before the sun, just as she always did. Alarm buzzing in her tiny one-bedroom apartment on the edge of Chicago's South Side. She stretched, not out of luxury, but necessity, ready to mop floors at buildings where her name meant nothing. Except now, something had changed. Inside the private elevator that led to Ethan Callahan's penthouse, Ava stood quietly, feeling like an intruder. She wore the same jeans and hoodie she always did, her hair bundled under a baseball cap. She hadn't expected to be back so soon after the strange proposal in the garden, and part of her wondered if it had all been some absurd joke. But the elevator opened, and there he was. Ethan, dressed down in a gray sweater and tailored pants, sleeves rolled up, mug in hand. He looked like a man who didn't need to try and still made the room bend to him. You came, he said, with a quiet sort of relief that surprised them both. Ava stepped in carefully. You said 10. I'm a janitor, not a liar. The tension cracked. Ethan motioned toward the dining table where folders, tablets, and a few open fashion catalogs were spread. We got a lot to cover. Ava sat cautiously. What exactly did I agree to again? He smiled faintly, but his tone held weight. One weekend. My ex-fiancée's engagement party. You'll pretend to be my bride-to-be. Elegant, confident, completely out of reach. She tilted her head. And you think I can pull that off? I think you already have. That line did something to her. Not in a fairy tale way, but in the real way. Like she'd been invisible for so long that someone seeing her felt foreign. Dangerous, even. By noon, Ethan's personal team arrived. Stylists, a speech coach, a body language expert. At first, they eyed Ava with suspicion, treating her like a project no one had asked for. But the more she followed direction, the more she asked thoughtful questions, the more their curiosity turned to admiration. By 3 p.m., she was in her first fitting. The mirror didn't lie. Gone was the woman with bleach-stained sneakers. In her place stood someone poised, striking. Ava, but sharper. The stylist blinked, then whispered, "You don't look like his janitor." Ava's eyes didn't leave her reflection. "That's because I'm not." Meanwhile, Ethan stood in the hallway, overhearing the comment. He hadn't expected the shift to be this fast, or this jarring. Something about seeing her in satin, head high, lips painted crimson, shook him. When she walked out of the dressing room, their eyes locked. There was an awkward silence, broken only when Ava said, "You're staring." He cleared his throat. "I didn't realize you'd take this so seriously." She shrugged. "You asked me to make people believe. And now I do," he replied, almost too quickly. That night, Ava returned home with shopping bags filled with items she'd never be able to afford. But she placed them neatly aside. She wasn't here for glitz. She was here to prove, to him and to herself, that people like her could adapt, evolve, and walk into rooms never meant for them. But what neither of them knew was how quickly fiction would start to tangle with reality, and how pretending might become the most dangerous thing of all. The limousine pulled up to the entrance of the opulent Langston Hotel in downtown Chicago, its brass-trimmed doors and velvet rope entrance gleaming under chandeliers that seemed to pour light straight from the stars. Outside, a photographer snapped shots of socialites arriving in glittering gowns and tailored tuxedos. But when Ethan Callahan stepped out with Ava Monroe on his arm, time paused. Ava wore a floor-length black gown, elegantly sculpted with a low back and delicate diamond accents that glimmered with each step. Her hair was swept up, revealing the quiet strength in her eyes. She looked nothing like the janitor who once swept conference hallways. She looked like someone born into this world, yet unmistakably above it. Whispers started before they even crossed the threshold. "Who is she? Is that Callahan's fiancée? She looks like European royalty." Ethan, composed as ever, guided her through the lobby. But beneath his calm facade, even he was stunned, not just by the effect Ava had on the room, but by the effect she had on him. He hadn't meant for it to feel this real. Inside the grand ballroom, chandeliers dripped with crystal, and the air was thick with champagne and arrogance. Investors, former classmates, industry leaders, all had gathered to celebrate Lauren Darcy's engagement. The woman Ethan was once meant to marry. And there she was, Lauren, in a red silk gown that demanded attention. Her smile faded the moment she saw them. Ava didn't flinch. She smiled softly, met Lauren's gaze, and nodded like a woman who'd already won the unspoken war. Lauren, caught off guard, turned abruptly and whispered to her fiancé, who, curiously, was now watching Ava with one eyebrow raised. "You're doing great," Ethan murmured as they made their way toward the open bar. "I'm pretending to belong," Ava whispered back, her smile never wavering. "You're not pretending," he said. "Not anymore." The crowd soon closed in around them, curious guests eager to decode this mystery woman. Ava, with disarming poise, answered questions with wit and honesty that had people laughing, listening, leaning in. When someone asked where she was from, she answered, "A little place where we polish floors and keep secrets," and everyone assumed it was a joke. Ethan watched as she moved through the room like she'd always been there, like she had nothing to prove and yet everything to offer. For once, he didn't have to perform. He didn't have to lead every conversation or wear a mask of success. She drew attention not by demanding it, but by deserving it. And people noticed. Lauren noticed. From across the ballroom, she watched Ava with thinly veiled irritation. When her own fiancé offered Ava a toast and said, to the woman stealing the spotlight, the glass in Lauren's hand tightened. Her laughter was brittle. Her charm cracked. Later, as Ava stepped away to find a moment of quiet near the window, Lauren approached Ethan. "You don't seriously expect me to believe this is real," she said, voice low, syrupy with venom. Ethan didn't blink. Believe what you want. She doesn't belong here. She's not here to belong. She's here to remind the room how dull it was before she walked in. Lauren flinched, just enough for Ethan to see it. He turned and walked away, leaving her seething in silence. Back near the orchestra, Ava stood with a glass of sparkling cider, observing the dance floor. Ethan joined her again, saying nothing at first. They both watched as couples swayed under the golden lights. Ready for the next performance? He finally asked, offering his hand. Ava hesitated, glancing around the room. The same room that once would have devoured her. But now, it felt oddly familiar. She slipped her hand into his. Let's give them something they'll talk about for the next decade. As they walked onto the dance floor, the music swelled and the room collectively leaned in. But beneath the shimmer, the tension was beginning to crack. Something was shifting between them, around them. And by the time the dance ended, the line between pretend and possible would blur beyond recognition. The orchestra swelled with a familiar melody. Soft, slow, romantic. A song that belonged in fairy tales, not corporate engagement galas. But here, in the center of the glittering ballroom, Ava and Ethan moved like they were the only two people who could hear it. Their hands met first, lightly, almost formally. But as their bodies drew closer, so did something else. Something unspoken. Ava's eyes met Ethan's. She tried to smile to keep things light, but his expression had shifted. No longer just composed or charismatic. There was something raw behind his gaze. You do realize I've never danced at a party like this before, she whispered, trying to ease the tension knotting in her chest. You could have fooled me, he said gently. You're stealing the show. She laughed, but it trembled. Just earning my bonus. His smile faded slightly. You've already given me more than she ever did. Ava blinked. Who? Lauren. The name hovered between them, uninvited. But Ethan didn't flinch. She gave me ambition. You give me honesty. The words hit harder than either expected. Ava looked away, her breath catching. This wasn't part of the arrangement. Compliments were fine. Performances were expected. But vulnerability? That wasn't in the contract. As they twirled, she could feel the pressure of every gaze on them. But Ethan's eyes never left her. For a man known for reading markets, predicting trends, and dominating boardrooms, he now looked like someone adrift in something unfamiliar, feeling. You keep looking at me like this isn't pretend, she said softly. Maybe it's not. Ava pulled her hand from his a half beat too early, pretending to brush her hair back. Her smile returned, but her eyes didn't follow. The music was still playing, but the moment had teetered towards something dangerous. They stepped off the dance floor in unison. The air felt heavier. Ava needed a drink, or a distraction, or a door. But before she could move, Lauren appeared, blocking their path like an elegant wall of resentment. Well, Lauren said, her voice dipped in ice, you certainly know how to make an entrance, Ethan. And an exit, it seems. Ethan remained calm. Lauren, she didn't acknowledge Ava, not even a glance. It's always been your thing, hasn't it? Replacing people the moment they become inconvenient. Ava stiffened, but stayed quiet. Ethan's jaw tensed. This isn't about you. Lauren's lips curled into a mock smile. Of course it's not. Nothing ever is. But just know, everyone in this room sees what you're doing. He didn't flinch. Good. Let them see it. It was only then Lauren turned to Ava, finally acknowledging her existence. Be careful, she said, her tone veiled like silk over a blade. When the spotlight fades, you'll be the first thing he forgets. Ava met her gaze evenly. Maybe, or maybe I'm the first thing he'll remember when the lights are gone. Lauren's smile faltered. Just a flicker. But it was enough. Ethan slipped a hand to the small of Ava's back, ushering her away before either of them said something irreversible. As they reached the edge of the ballroom again, silence hovered between them like fog. Ava's heart was pounding, not from the confrontation, but from what came before it. The dance, the words, the way he looked at her like she wasn't playing a part anymore. She set her drink down without tasting it. I should leave soon, she said quietly. Ethan didn't argue. Instead, he whispered she was wrong, you know. Ava tilted her head. You're not pretending. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The music continued. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the false perfection of it all. But in the stillness between them, something shifted. This wasn't just a performance anymore. Something real had crept in, and neither of them knew what to do with it. The night had unraveled in ways neither of them predicted. Now, inside the back seat of a black luxury limousine, weaving through the quiet streets of New York, Ava and Ethan sat in silence. Not the awkward kind, not even the cold kind. Just silence born from too much emotion and not enough clarity. City lights flickered through the tinted windows like scattered stars, casting reflections across their faces. Ava, in her fitted black gown, leaned slightly toward the window, her eyes tracing the blurred skyline. The same city that once made her feel small now seemed like the backdrop to a moment too big to name. Ethan sat beside her, still in his tuxedo, still too composed for what he was feeling inside. He glanced at her hand resting on her lap. Calm still. His own hovered nearby, unsure. Ava finally broke the silence, her voice quiet, almost lost in the hum of the tires. Thank you. For tonight. He turned to her. You don't need to thank me. I do, she said, still watching the lights. You let me be someone else for a few hours. Someone who belongs. Ethan's brow furrowed slightly. Ava, you didn't become someone else. You finally let them see who you really are. Her gaze flicked toward him, surprised. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't flattering her. He meant it. And that made it harder. She swallowed. You don't know me, Ethan. Not really. You saw a girl in a cafeteria with coffee on her blouse and decided she was safe to bring to a party. You're right, he admitted. That's what I thought at first. That you'd keep it simple. That you wouldn't matter. She turned fully now, eyebrows raised. He smiled faintly. But then you walked into that ballroom, and everything changed. Ava laughed once. Dry, skeptical. It was a dress and a little lipstick. Don't let the transformation fool you. It wasn't the dress, he said. It was the way you looked at people. The way you didn't try to impress anyone. You weren't pretending. Not even once. And I realized, somewhere between the second dance and the champagne, you're the only real thing I've seen in years. Her heart kicked against her ribs. She hadn't come here for feelings. She hadn't expected sincerity. She had been hired, indirectly, but hired nonetheless, for a role. She never asked for this. I can't do this, she said softly. Ethan blinked. Do what? Blur lines. Pretend something meant nothing when it clearly did. Or pretend it meant something when it might have just been. A moment. A pause. I don't want to be confused about what I am to someone again, she added. The limo slowed in front of her building. Modest, clean, a world away from the penthouses and ballrooms they'd occupied tonight. She reached for the door handle, but paused. You were kind tonight, Ethan. Maybe too kind, she said. But whatever this was, whatever it felt like, we both know it wasn't supposed to last past tonight. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. So she nodded gently, smiled a half smile that didn't reach her eyes, and stepped out of the car. The cool night air met her skin like truth. Good night, Mr. Caldwell, she said, her voice steady now, almost rehearsed. Ethan watched her walk toward her building, her heels clicking softly against the pavement, her silhouette growing smaller until the door swallowed her whole. And then, the silence returned. But this time it wasn't peaceful. It was full of questions, of regrets not yet formed, of words left unsaid. Ethan leaned back, staring at the empty seat beside him. The city glowed outside the window, unaware of what just happened in the back of a limo. He had money, power, and presence. But for the first time in years, he felt the weight of something slipping away, and he wasn't sure why it mattered so much. A week had passed. The office had returned to its normal rhythm. Muffled footsteps on marble floors, keyboards clicking, elevators pinging in the distance. No more gala dresses, no glittering chandeliers or whispered gossip. Just business as usual at Caldwell and Reed. At her desk in the marketing department, Ava Monroe typed steadily, headphones in, posture straight. There were no signs of the black gown, the limelight, or the man who had briefly become her world. She wore a soft gray sweater, her hair pulled into a practical bun. A coffee sat cooling beside her, untouched. But inside, everything had changed. She hadn't expected it to rattle her this much. After all, she had gone in knowing it was a favor, a transaction, a temporary illusion. Still, the silence that followed had carved a deeper ache than she was willing to admit. He hadn't called, he hadn't emailed, and she hadn't dared hope he would. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard when her office line buzzed. "Mr. Caldwell wants to see you," said the receptionist's voice. Ava blinked. "Me? Yes. Conference room 12. She stood slowly, smoothing her skirt. Her legs felt heavier than usual as she walked past familiar coworkers, past the elevators, past the glass meeting rooms filled with people who still didn't really know her. Conference room 12 sat at the end of the hall, sunlight spilling through its floor-to-ceiling windows, the Manhattan skyline painted behind it like a living mural. She stepped inside. Ethan stood alone, hands in his pockets, wearing a navy suit without a tie. He looked rested, but there was something vulnerable in his eyes, something less polished. "Hi," she said carefully. Lydia." A beat of silence. The air felt full again, like that car ride home, full of all the things they didn't say. "I asked you here for a marketing review," he began, then smiled faintly. "But that was just a cover." Ava raised a brow. "I've been thinking," he continued, "a lot. About what I want. About what's real." She waited. "I don't need another fake anything." "Ava," he said, "not another arrangement, not another show. I want to know if this, what we felt, is real, and if you felt it too." Her throat tightened. "You don't have to answer now. I know I hired you under less than clear terms, and I wouldn't blame you for walking out." She exhaled slowly. "You didn't hire me to fall for you." "No," he said, "but I did." The words hung in the air like confession. He stepped closer, not looming, just present, human, not the CEO, just a man. "I thought I needed a decoy, a placeholder, but I needed a mirror," he said. "And you show me the part of myself I thought was gone." Ava looked down, unsure what to do with the warmth crawling up her chest. "You don't even know where I live," she said softly. "I'd like to," he replied. She chuckled, eyes misting over. "You're a terrible fake date, Ethan Caldwell. Then let me be a real one." The sun caught the side of her face as she looked up at him. There was no gown, no pretense, just her, standing in a quiet glass room in the middle of a busy company, finally seen. "I wasn't pretending either," she whispered. He smiled, not the confident, press-ready smile he gave investors. This one was crooked, honest, maybe even a little scared. "So?" he asked. "Should we start again?" She nodded. "Let's." Outside the conference room, the city carried on. Horns honking, taxis rushing, people chasing appointments. But inside, something else had begun. Something not born of wealth or strategy, but of choice, of truth. And this time, the spotlight didn't feel borrowed. It felt earned. Please ensure to like, share, and subscribe for heartwarming stories like this. Likewise, tell us where you are watching from in the comment below.